All right, guys, we are going to be talking today about some exposure timing and just some ways to really visualize it. So, if you're a coach, if you are a lifter, and maybe you have a coach and they are very adamant about having you train on specific days and they might be throwing a little bit of a fit, if you change those days, this is going to be why. So, we have three columns here. We have a example of a common split that I like to use where you will have your competition squat, and then basically 3 days later, you will have a pause squat. And then I just kind of gave some examples as well. So, like maybe someone's Saturday is their primary. So they will have their Wednesday be their secondary, so on and so forth. And then I also put in here some little colors to kind of dictate the appropriateness of where you would put that secondary or primary day. So, first, looking at the days, it doesn't really matter which days they are. It could be something like Monday to Thursday, Tuesday to Friday, like I said, Wednesday to Saturday. I like to have just 3 to 4 days in between these exposures, just so that way there is some fatigue that's been pulled off and we still have those adaptations from the previous session, whether that's primary to secondary or secondary to primary. Um, and so you'll see here, I am using in this second column, the Wednesday being the secondary and the Saturday being the primary. So what would it look like if we put the primary right after the Wednesday secondary session? Well, I have it colored in red because, red means not good usually, right? Red means stop. That would likely be too close because there's probably too much fatigue that has been generated by this Wednesday session to meaningfully display our strength on the primary session. So that is why next we can look at Friday. That may be a little bit better, just depending upon the lifter. If someone has like shorter femurs, longer torso, if they're really squatty and really efficient, they might be able to get away with this simply because their technique is so efficient. If they are not incredibly efficient, that's when we might be looking at this Wednesday and Saturday setup, or even potentially slightly longer, depending upon what that secondary variation would be. And now we can also look at it in this last column of the Saturday to Wednesday primary to secondary setup, because some people don't also consider that your primary can potentiate your secondary, which feeds into your primary and it kind of builds and builds, right? So again, same concept here, except I use an even darker like maroon color. So if you squatted heavy on Saturday, you likely wouldn't want to put your secondary right after that because you're just going to be cooked. Generally speaking, because most people's primaries, if we are all agreeing on the common nomenclature, are going to be your heaviest exposure. It's going to be the thing that you are trying to meaningfully test or track your strength in any sort of given movement. For here, I'm basically using the squat, as you can see in this farthest left column. So putting your secondary squat right after your primary squat is probably not the move. And then Monday, again, similar story, probably wouldn't be the best because you are going to be incurring much more fatigue, generally speaking, after that primary session rather than the secondary session. Tuesday might be a little bit more optimal. I have it as yellow, kind of like a cautious, like that might work. And then we have it obviously here on Wednesday to where ideally, in a perfect world, the athlete comes in feeling fresh enough to have a significant result in that secondary exposure, but not over fresh to where the weights feel super heavy. They've almost detrained, right? Everything feels too heavy. So that is kind of the logic behind why I structure my exposure timings the way I do. There's nothing fancy about this. There's nothing earth shattering, but this just kind of gives maybe some new lifters, some new coaches an idea of, hey, this is what you want to consider when you're writing a program, or this is what your coach is trying to do with his exact program. So hopefully that helps you guys. I might be doing this a little bit more often, maybe with other lifts or other programming strategies, but hopefully you can take this into your own programming if you're a coach, or look at your own program that your coach gave you with a new set of eyes, and you can understand that you don't necessarily want to just go off program based upon certain days feeling good, or if things are feeling bad, you can portray that info or give that info to your coach.